Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take out stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Misunderstanding Conventions, written by Thelonious Howe. Trumbull stared at his men. Well, it would have been a stretch to call them men. Not one among them had fully shed their white fur fully, still juvenile both in body and in mind. They were all cowered near the back of their pen, huddled together, like hapless prey cornered by the maws of a great beast. The war was lost. They might not know it, but he knew it. The Empire was sending its aged and its youth alike to fight, and probably die on the front lines. If this was the best they could muster, then all hope was truly gone. He silently cursed to himself. He should have been better. He should have posted keener sentries. He should have stayed awake himself to make sure none of the bloody war apes got a drop on them. But got the drop on them they did. His troops never even had the opportunity to rouse before they were encompassed by the enemy. Not one had the chance to grab the rifle and self-terminate, their honor intact. He wished he'd been more reactive so that he could have personally liquidated some of them, spare them the indignity that would be visited upon them by the humans before being captured. But the past was the past, and they were where they were. There was only one course now that could maintain a shred of his dignity. He would offer his own flesh to the carnivorous psychopaths in the hopes that they would show a modicum of mercy upon his subordinates. He scanned those who were keeping watch over him, looking for something obvious that would signify rank or status, one he could, perchance, negotiate with. He spotted one that seemed to fit the bill quite nicely. It's dressed incredibly garish, unlike most of the simians wandering about. Instead of the earthen hues meant to meld into the background, it wore foot coverings that were a bright white, accented with trousers that were a deep blue, and its tunic was a bright blood red. Trumbull scoffed, leave it to the humans to dress even their nobility in the color of gore. But, as it was the only chance for any sort of reprieve for his men, he swallowed what remained of his conviction and marched up to it. "Excuse, just 1 second," the human cut him off, as it toyed with a pad in his hand. A few more taps, and it lowered the device and turned to him. "Hey there, sorry about that. Now, what can I do for you?" Trumbull straightened as much as he could. While he had no inkling as to what rank this particular one held, he figured that by playing up his willingness to be subservient, his odds would improve just that much. "Superior, I would—" "No," the human cut him off again. "None of that shit. No, not military. I'm with the Red Cross. I'm Catherine. Miss McPherson, if you're feeling formal. Kate is fine." Trumbull swallowed it. She wasn't military, meaning that if she was in a holding camp, she was probably some sadistic noble looking to pick out personal playthings. "I know I have no right to make requests, but my soldiers, they're barely out of pophood. White fur's the lot of them. They're all simple conscripts, shoved into the front by the Empire. As such, I am formally requesting that any and all torture be directly inflicted upon me, and me alone." The human's expression changed immediately. She looked mad, and Trumbull couldn't help but fear he had angered her. She quickly glanced around, looking for something, and as soon as her eyes landed on the nearest military human, she barked, "You there! Get the colonel here, right now!" The poor soldier looked both startled and mortified, reinforcing Trumbull's earlier thought that she was some kind of high-ranking member of the hierarchy. "But ma'am, I'm—" "Now!" Kate reiterated, causing the scared soldier to scamper away without further argument. Her attention quickly turned back to Trumbull, and she leapt towards him. He was certain he was about to be torn apart, ripped limb from limb. But that wasn't his fate. Instead, he quickly found himself in a firm but gentle embrace. "I'm so sorry. I'll make this right, I promise," the human whispered into his ear. Well, he had no idea what to make of the strange display. Kate simply held on to him until the rather large man, perhaps the largest he had ever seen, strode into view. "Kate, what's this all—" Kate released Trumbull and was on her feet in an instant, throwing a single finger accusingly towards the colonel. "Don't you dare, Kate, me!" Her other hand extended another finger towards Trumbull. "I will remind you that while these people are not human, they are still covered under the Geneva Conventions, the Maddox principles, not to mention the whole host of moral imperatives. I swear to whatever high power anyone here believes in, if I find so much as a grain of truth in this one's accusations, I will not only have your commission, but I'll make sure that you spend the rest of your days in a decommissioned listening post in the wasteland that is Siberia. Do you understand me?" Trumbull was in awe. Though this Kate was half the size of this colonel, she was overflowing with anger, her face nearly matching the shade of her tunic as she unleashed her tirade on the poor man. She seemed ready to leap on him and tear out his throat should he say the wrong thing. The colonel raised his arms to calm the raging woman. "Calm down, Kate. What accusations?" "Torture." Kate was indignant, as though it was the most obvious conclusion in the galaxy. The colonel turned to Trumbull with a raised eyebrow. "Torture? Really? Did you accuse my men of torturing you, or they yours?" Kate also turned to face him. "It's okay, tell him what you told me. There'll be no repercussions. I'll pull legal authority if I have to. Anything you say is protected, and I'll make sure that you're safe." Trumbull suddenly felt very insecure, more so than when he had first approached the female human. Here were two humans, both enraged seemingly for different reasons, staring him down. Neither of them seemed pleased with the prospect of him throwing accusations of torture around, which confused him greatly. That was the nature of war and being captured. The enemy was to relieve the stresses of war upon their rival foes. So why did these humans seem to abhor him asking the question? He scratched the back of his paw nervously. "Well, to clarify, no. I issued no declarations of torture. I simply requested that it be directed towards me, to save my men any agony you have planned to inflict." Kate's already crimson hue seemed to deepen. "Oh, I misunderstood," she said meekly. The colonel let out a heavy breath. "Thank Christ. Do you have any idea how much paperwork the court time that would have been? Nobody here is going to harm any of you. We have rules of war. Any of your injured will be seen to. You'll get proper rations and accommodations, and we'll see to it that you're treated humanely." He then turned his attention back to the heavily embarrassed Kate. "Miss McPherson, please make sure that you get clarity before you accuse me of war crimes in the future. Here I was worried I'd spend the rest of my days up to my arse in snow." With that, the colonel spun on his heel and made back the way he came. Kate approached Trumbull and offered him a slip of hard paper. "I'm sorry about that. I misread the situation. I don't want to cause you any trouble. Here's my card. If anyone, and I do mean anyone, gives you any problems, you call that number on the bottom, and I'll come running." With card in hand, Trumbull was gently reassured he had done nothing wrong, and that there would be no repercussions for this incident before gently being ushered back towards his still trembling unit. Upon his return, Trumbull was assaulted by a litany of questions. "Are they going to peel our flesh? Are we set for the firing line? Will they eat us?" He decided to copy the gesture that seemed to have been so effective earlier. He raised his hands to placate his anxious crew. "No, seemingly, we are to be treated, if necessary, housed, clothed, and fed. No harm will befall us, apparently. These people have rules for war." The troops glanced at each other, an equal mix of confusion and apprehension plastered on each of their faces. "What? What kind of people have rules for war?" one of the bewildered white furs asked. Trumbull looked back at the little human in the red tunic, who just moments ago was well prepared to eviscerate a man twice his size, and shuddered. "The kind who knows what happens without them." End of story. Story number 2. In the Dark Forest, written by Ouija Warrior. Catsup found, to her slight surprise, that she was enjoying herself, even if she was sitting on a cold ground next to a runaway oxidation process. The genuine first contact scenario was unheard of. No one had found a new species in living memory. Yet here she was, by herself, having unexpectedly stumbled over a planet full of sentience in a stellar system that the models said should be uninhabitable, while trying to find an answer to certain irregularities in the local star's radiation spectrum. She had found a lone local in the area of tall vegetation shortly before local star set, and, having read and reread the old and never-before-opened first contact regulations on file in her computer, had contacted the Terran, or human, as it insisted on calling its species. The universal translator, once it had been calibrated and had collected enough words, made communication easy, and Catsup was learning so much she wondered if her mind could hold it all. "So to summarize," Catsup said, as she tried to understand this new concept, "your thinkers," the Terran who insisted on being called Josh interrupted her. "Our scientists, yes. Or possibly philosophers, but I think it was a scientist who came up with the idea." "Apologies. Your scientists came up with the idea?" "Hypothesis," Josh interrupted again. "I think hypothesis is a better term. Of course, Katsop said as she tried to regain the trail of her thoughts. Your scientists came up with the hypothesis that everyone is being very quiet. The Josh bobbed its head as another log was placed on what the Terran insister was calling a campfire. Katsop was unsure why a camp on a fire was a good thing, but she had ignored it in her pursuit of seemingly more promising tracks. An oversimplification, but yes. Katsop wrinkled her whiskers as she tried to understand, glancing around what Josh had referred to as our camp earlier. It was big for a single sentient, Katsop thought, but the locals might think differently. She returned to the track of thoughts that she was pursuing. Being very quiet in order to... The Josh stared into the vegetable matter, combusting. Survive, first and foremost, I believe, the Josh said after a while. The logic is that to radiate is to be seen is to be hunted is to be exterminated, something like that. Katsop wriggled her momentary discomfort. The Josh had claimed to be a hunter when Katsop had first initiated contact, lack of fangs and claws notwithstanding. A rather paranoid and pessimistic worldview, she ventured. And even so, humanity carried on spraying EM radiation in all directions for a couple hundred orbits of your planet thus far. The Josh kept staring into the flickering flames. Yes. Enough electromagnetic radiation that the nearest civilizations developed various cosmological theories explaining why Sol, as you call it, suddenly was such a noisy star. Yes? Katsop wrinkled her whiskers again. Even if this would attract the attention of others who might, as you put it, see you and hunt you. Oh yes, we even used our strongest transmitters to send messages towards likely stars. Some even built stronger transmitters just to do that. Feeling her eyes drawn towards the oxidation process, Katsop shifted her legs, struggling slightly in the above-average gravity. But why? She asked. If you believe other civilizations were a danger to you, why? Well, the Josh said as he reached for an odd contraption, crafted from a long metal tube and what looked like hardened plant fibers, that he had carried when Katsop had revealed herself to him, and he had kept within reach since. Firstly, not everyone agreed with the idea, and secondly, some of us figured that someone might show up, or at least reply. And I think the idea of being alone was too much for humanity. Wriggling at sudden sounds from the shadows beyond the light from the oxidation process, Katsop cast an inquiring glance at Josh. Someone might show up and, fight you. We're good at fighting, the Josh said as two other Terrans suddenly appeared in the circle of light. Say, that's an interesting little ship you've arrived in. Superluminal, he said. Just how many know that you're checking out our solar system? The light from the runaway oxidation process reflected in the Josh's eyes and teeth as Katsop's wriggles grew more pronounced. I mean, he said as he looked toward Katsop's shuttle just beyond the circle of light. No, officially. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.